People might assume that Nihon Falcom, creator of Ys and overall RPG god, have been the only ones to work on the series throughout its 30-year lifespan, but that's not actually the case. Here, come closer and let me indulge you in a short history lesson that no one cares about, but helps me frame the video since I can't write introductions. In 1993, Falcom decided to outsource the fourth entry of Ys to not just one developer, but two. Ys 4 Mask of the Sun and Ys 4 Dawn of Ys, released on two separate consoles and feature entirely different plots, the main element in common being the setting, the nation of Celceta. Apparently, neither games were up to Falcom's standards because 20 years later they said, "Those? No, those aren't Ys 4. You want to see the real Ys 4? Here it is. You're welcome." Ys Memories of Celceta is Falcom's reimagining of the fourth game in the series, combining story elements of the two previous versions while adding more content and characters. Despite owning the game on Vita, I never really played it much, so I was excited to finally give it a shot on PC after falling madly in love with Ys 8 a couple months ago. However, I made sure to keep my expectations in check since I was told by a lot of people that Celceta is usually considered to be one of the weakest entries in the series. And I'll be honest, I'm kinda conflicted about this game as a whole, so the tone of this video is gonna be a little different than what you might be used to on my channel. What I discovered in the land of Celceta was a fantastic PC port of a very flawed but fun experience. Memories of Celceta takes place shortly after the events of Ys 2, and tells the story about how the ever-dashing Adol Kristen started to go by the title of Adventurer. The story kicks off with Adol stumbling into the town of Kaznan with a bad case of amnesia. All he knows is that he was exploring the mysterious forest of Celceta, which heralds a new adventure to uncover both his lost memories and the mysteries of Celceta. Seems a little simple? Well, that's because it is. I can't speak for how the other Ys 4s handled their stories, you know, cause I've never played them, but I'm going to assume Falcom just did the best with what they had. For a game like this, amnesia is a solid framing device, giving both Adol and the player a reason to explore, since his memories are spread all throughout the land, eventually allowing you to piece together how he lost his memories in the first place. The plot is, well, we'll get to that. Oh boy, will we get to that. Listen, if Celceta wants to focus on gameplay over story, I don't see why I shouldn't either. Adol, being the handsome lad he is, has...
Colin, we've talked about this before. You have to tone it down.
Oh, come on. I can't help it. Just look at this man.
Yeah, I know, but I don't think people want to hear about your Adol crush anymore. They might be getting tired of it.
Fine, I'll try. But just so you know, you can't stop me, because this man is beautiful. And the world has to know. Anyway, Adol is tasked with mapping out the Great Forest, so the bulk of your time playing is spent filling out the map and landmarks as the plot is gradually introduced. Exploring is encouraged since you're given rewards for making progress, most of which are just large bags of cash. There are a total of 6 playable characters, and the game lets you choose 3 of them to be in your active party. Like with 7 and 8, Celceta encourages switching your party members frequently to take advantage of enemy weaknesses, since each member of the party is categorized by one of 3 attack types. There's also skills to learn for each party member, keeping the combat fresh. At this point, if you've seen my Ys 8 video or have played that game, you're probably going, oh, so it plays basically the same. And my answer to that would be, yeah. Kind of. A lot of the design philosophies established in this and 7 were polished to near perfection in 8, so I won't go into too much detail to avoid repeating myself. I know it's unfair to bring up Ys 8 in this review though, so I'll keep the comparisons to a minimum. One thing I actually found myself enjoying more was how it handled switching. When you hit the switch button, the character you switch to doesn't just swap into the active spot, but the perspective switches to their current position. This doesn't seem like anything impressive on paper, but I found it a really cool way to set up combos with skills. You can unleash a barrage of attacks, switch to another character, and attack the enemy with multiple characters at once. Another cool thing is that every single character has a special field skill that lets you reach previously inaccessible areas on the map and discover secrets. This is a really interesting addition, and I hope Ys brings it back if the party system returns in 9. Celceta's combat isn't perfect, but I can't deny just how much fun it is to run around and take down monsters. Attacks come out in a flurry, and the dodging and blocking mechanics are pretty responsive too. Celceta was the game to introduce flash moves, which are Ys's take on perfect dodges. If you pull one off, time slows down for the enemy and your entire party gets a brief moment of invincibility. The clunky block system in 7 has been overhauled, now letting you block with a single click of a button instead of 2. If you block at just the right moment, you perform a flash guard, turning all your attacks into critical hits for a few seconds. This is actually my favorite iteration of the mechanic, since I found pulling off flash guards to be the easiest it's ever been. Both Celceta and 7 used fixed cameras, which gives the game a retro arcadey feel. I love this in games because it maintains focus on exactly what the developer wants you to see. One downside to this though is that there isn't a jump button, probably because it breaks level design. The game likes to throw obstacles at you in dungeons that could easily be avoided if Adol could just hop over it. This isn't the end of the world, but it irked me every single time it happened. Speaking of dungeons, they were surprisingly fun. Each of them has a unique gimmick to differentiate them from each other, and with the exception of the final dungeon, were pretty engaging. East dungeons are a completionist paradise, since hunting down chests to find better weapons and armor to give you an edge on enemies is always rewarding. Where these dungeons suffer, in my opinion, are the bosses. Celceta's bosses feel almost tedious, since I often figured out how each of them worked early on in the fight. I spent more time waiting for the fights to be over than figuring out how to complete them. It also doesn't help that the main boss theme sounds pretty generic, which is a shame as Falcom usually kills it when it comes to their boss themes. Again, this strikes me as another case of them doing the best with what they had when it comes to 4's foundations. If my memory serves me right, there were really only 3 bosses in the entire game that broke away from this, but everything else was just a solid okay. They weren't bad bosses, but they could have been much better. It's outside of the dungeons where most of my issues with the game pop up. First of all, the game features a fast travel system, but you're limited the entire first half of the game to warping to monuments of the same color, and you can only warp at these monuments. Once you reach the halfway point, you can warp to them from anywhere, but despite having a legitimate reason for waiting so long story-wise, not having it early on wastes your time. Wasting your time sums up about the first half of the game, since a lot of things that happen just feel like filler. Good build-up is a crucial part of Falcom games, and don't get me wrong, there are some genuinely strong story elements established, but a lot of what's built up ends up going nowhere. It's still charming, but in the grand scheme of things, it feels bloated. For a game that's only 20 hours long, that's not great. It almost feels like a game that was meant to be 10 or 20 hours longer than it was, but simply didn't have enough resources to accomplish that. The second half is where things really kick off, and I think the story could have been reworked to make the entire game as consistent as that. There's also another minor issue I just couldn't stop thinking about, and it has to do with towns. This is a very specific criticism, but hear me out. Spread throughout each of the towns are unique places to craft and modify weapons and armor, using materials you gather on the field. You can knock yourself out doing all this work to get tiny improvements, but the game never gives you any incentives to put the time in. All you ever really need to do is buy the newest equipment each new town supplies. Do that and you can clear the next dungeon with little to no issues. Crafting and gathering unfortunately feels unnecessary when all you ever really need are equipment, healing items, and accessories, all of which can be bought with money or found in chests. I feel if Falcom had a bit more budget on this game, they could have fleshed out these mechanics, but at least they built the foundation for 8 to go absolutely crazy with them. I really don't hate this game, honestly. It just has a lot of weird quirks in its design that were really hard to ignore. One thing that's great about towns, however, are the NPCs and quests, which are full of charm thanks to the great localization by Xseed. I feel like this review could use some much needed positivity, don't you? Visually, this game is a huge step up from the PSP Falcom games, and for an early Vita game, it looks pretty solid. It's not the prettiest game, sure, but if you consider when it came out, it's pretty easy to forgive. Xseed lives up to their reputation of making incredible PC ports, as this cleans up all the models and textures. I'm not an expert in the subject, but the configuration options are also insanely in-depth and go above and beyond what most companies would do for a Vita port. They also use higher quality source versions of all the character art, which is great. Those and the UI look wonderful in 1080p. I mean, look at Adol being all adorable in his high definition hoodie. We're not cutting that.
I can't do this anymore.
Performance-wise, the game was drastically improved. It lets players set the FPS to pretty much whatever they want, and all the weird Vita system gimmicks made the transition to PC seamlessly. This port of Celceta is by far the best version, and I would really only recommend the Vita version if portability is important to you. The game's sound design is pretty good, for the most part. Falcom always kills it with their soundtracks, and while the songs are generally pretty damn great, I feel like the soundtrack is a little inconsistent. Besides the boss theme that I already mentioned, nothing stands out as bad, but the tracks range from amazing to decent. I will say though, when this game's soundtrack goes hard, it really slaps. The voice acting is few and far between, but what's there is good. The only real complaint I have is that the voice actors were reused a lot. For example, Sean Chiplock, who you might know from his performance as Reen the Meme Machine Swarzer from Trails of Cold Steel, plays like 3 different characters in Celceta. And while he does a great job at all of them, seriously Sean, if you somehow ever see this, big respect my dude, keep up the good work. It was still kind of jarring to play through scenes with multiple Seans talking. I understand that budget limitations are a thing, so I can't exactly fault the Xseed of 5 years ago to really go all in on something like this, especially when all the performances are already good. All in all, not bad, Falcom. Okay, since I'm running out of stuff to talk about, it's time to address the elephant in the room: the plot and the ending. Now, I think the plot has its moments, but yeah, it's kind of dumb. It's hard to explain myself without spoiling anything, and I could even forgive it considering the game clearly banks more on its gameplay. I've seen older Ys games do better, but I want to judge it by its own merit. The flashbacks are where the story shines, especially ones dealing with Adol's past. It's adorable to see his relationship with his parents and his motivations for wanting to explore the world, even if it has nothing to do with the conflict in Celceta. Speaking of the main conflict, oh man, is it not great. There's some neat nods to other Ys games that I appreciated, but I'd be lying if I said I'd love the story. It's pretty predictable and the villain is just bad. The main party was overall a fun group, but weren't able to reach their full potential thanks to the constraints of the narrative. Except Frida, who is such a queen. Give her a cameo in Ys 9, Falcom, you know she deserves it. For the most part, the story is average at best, but the final dungeon and everything after that is almost inexcusable. I like to think I'm a pretty positive guy, but it's really hard to find anything redeemable here. The final dungeon drags way too long, and while the boss of that dungeon is challenging, the game implodes as it rushes to wrap up the narrative. The conclusion doesn't understand or utilize anything the players have learned, and the final boss might just be one of the easiest fights in the game. It's genuinely the only part of the game I can say is straight up bad. It's an unsatisfying ending in both gameplay and story, and I think that's the reason why it sat so poorly with me. It dampened the experience, yes, but even then, it's hard to say I truly hated the game. Ys Memories of Celceta is interesting. As flawed as it is, it's still a really fun game. Would I say it's a good entry point in the series? Well, as long as you know that there are much better Ys games out there and are willing to give them a shot, then yeah, you could start here. My 20 hours spent in Celceta was an enjoyable experience, but I just wish it was a bit more polished. I know I might have come off as really negative in this video, but that's really just because I know Falcom can do better, and have. But hey, think about it this way. If something still this fun is considered to be the weakest game in the series, then Ys must be something really special. I give Ys Memories of Celceta a B-. You know, cause it's a good port. If it wasn't such a good port, I probably wouldn't have gotten such a high score, but that's just how it is. Deal with it. The video is finally over. I've been working on this for about 2 months now, and I'm just so happy it's finally done. If you're wondering why I sound a little different, it's because right as I was recording the last bit of this, I got sick. Nothing I can do about that. I'm not delaying this video anymore, so put up with me sounding like shit for a little bit, alright? I'm gonna fire off the thanks real quick on this one so I can go lay down. Thank you to Xseed for providing me with a review copy of Celceta. Even though working on this almost killed me, it was still an honor to do so. Thank you guys. And thank you to @SupremeZerker on Twitter for script editing and also being the guest voice actor. He worked really hard on this as well. Please go follow him on Twitter. This could be the bit of the video where I stop everything and tell you all my ats, so just look down there and follow me on all the respective things, okay? If you're wondering what to expect next on the channel, I have 2 Why You Should Care videos in production. The first being Persona 3 and 4 Dancing, and the second being Steins Gate Elite. Alright, that's gonna be it for me. I have, drained myself completely at this point. I'm going to go lay down now, but just know I love each and every one of you. Alrighty, bye-bye.